In this video, we're going to extend on what we did in the previous video, except in this case, we're going to focus on for loops and also arrays in PHP. Now, before you start, you need to make sure that you have your web server running. And if you haven't or you've forgotten how to do it, go back to the previous video and watch maybe the first minute or so. Now, we'll start by focusing on for loops. The syntax for for loops in PHP is very similar to the syntax in Java and JavaScript. So basically, first you define your iterator variable, then you describe your exit condition, and afterwards you increment your iterator variable. So here we go. There's my declaration of my iterator variable. It's very similar to Java and JavaScript, except we need to be very careful that we don't forget to write dollar signs. Because again, in PHP, we define variables by writing a dollar sign before the variable name. Okay, cool. Now we have a for loop. Inside of this loop, I'm just going to write a little message so we can keep track of what I is. So I'll write a string I equals, I'll append the variable I to it, and then I'll put a line break afterwards. Let's see what happens. We'll go back into our browser, and there you see there's our loop executing 10 lines of code there. Cool, so that's loops. Nothing crazy, nothing hard. If we wanted to, we could put an if condition inside of here. So maybe I could say if I is an even number, then maybe we could print another message to ourselves. Maybe this case I will write I is even, and we'll get rid of the variable there. Cool. So maybe after every single even number, we should see the message I is even. Cool. So 6 is even, 8's even, 2's even. It said that 0 is even, and that's because I didn't write an extra condition there to make sure I is not equal to 0. Alright, so that is for loops in PHP. It's nothing scary, it's nothing hard, it's exactly the same as most other languages. Next, let's focus on arrays. Now, the way that we can create an array in PHP is just by writing array bracket. Okay, this would be an empty array that contains nothing inside of it. If we'd like to put some stuff inside of it, we just have to list it. So here I'll write we are learning arrays, and now we have an array that contains 1, 2, 3, 4 words inside of it. Similar to other languages, if we want to extract a particular item from the array, we just use square brackets, and inside of them we write the index. So this is going to print out the word R. If we wanted to print out the word learning, we should put in our index 2 there. Let's have a look. Perfect. We see learning. Now, another thing we can do with PHP is we can have it dump all the information inside of this array. Now, it would be nice if it was as simple as just trying to print out the entire array just by echoing it. But let's see what happens in this situation. It literally just says array, okay, because it's an array that has nothing to do with any of the text or anything inside of the array. If we want PHP to tell us everything inside of that array, what we need to do is use another command, which is called var_dump. And basically what this method does is it goes through the array and just extracts all the information inside of it. Let's have a look. Here it is here. Here's the result. It says that A is an array that contains 4 items. In the first index, it contains a string with 2 characters, we. In the next index, it contains a string with 3 characters, R, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, so this is just a neat way to try and display what's inside of our array on the screen, maybe just for debugging or something like that. Now, it's important to notice that PHP has automatically assigned each of the strings we entered into that array a corresponding index. Now, what's cool about arrays in PHP is that we didn't necessarily need to have a numerical index here. we actually could have replaced any of these numbers with another string. And for that reason, these numbers are not called indexes, they're called keys because they don't necessarily have to be indexes, they could be replaced with any string. Now, an example of this would be if we were to try to create an array that would store information about a car. So in this case, I have an array, I've called it B, and this array contains 3 items. Now, the first item has been given the key type, and it points to the value sedan. Then the next item in the array has the key brand, and it's pointing to the brand Toyota. So this array doesn't have any indexes in the way that we understand them as 0, 1, 2. Instead, the arrays have keys, and each key points to the value that we want to store inside the array. Let's have a look at what this looks like when we var dump it. So I'll echo br just so I can have a space, and let's var dump b this time. So here it is down here, and you'll notice there are no numbers anymore. There are no indexes. Instead, we have these keys. So it's the same kind of idea. It's still an array, except instead of 0, 1, 2, 3 to designate what the item is or where the item is in the array, we have these keys. Now, the way we would access each of these individual items in the array is similar to how we did before, except instead of writing in the index, we need to write in the key. So I will go to the B array, and instead of writing, for example, the index 1, instead I need to tell it the key. So I'll say, give me the type. And this should show me the word sedan because we're going to the B array and we're accessing the data that type is pointing to. Let's have a look. Sedan. There it is there. Now, because we have an array which doesn't have indices, we're going to need a special way to loop through each of the items inside of it. And the way that we can do that in PHP is using a for each loop. Now the syntax for this is that first you write the name of the array you'd like to loop through, and you write as, and then a placeholder variable to represent the value of the data that's stored inside of the array. So the value would, in this case, would be sedan, Toyota, and 19,000. Let's have a look at what this does. I'll echo out the value and I'll put a BR next to it. And hopefully we see sedan, Toyota, 19,000. Cool, it worked. Sedan, Toyota, 19,000. Another thing that we can do with these for each loops is we can have it tell us the corresponding key for that value. So we would just have to write in what key points to the value. So now this key variable is a placeholder for the different keys for each of the items inside of the array. Okay, let's have a look. I'll put the key variable at the beginning and a space in between. And hopefully we see type sedan, brand Toyota, price 19,000. And we do. It works. Now what should we do if we have more than one car? This array is only useful to store the information about one car. If we had 2 cars, we'd basically need to copy this, paste it, and change all the information. So for example, I'll make a hatch, which is a Mazda, and I'll make it a little bit more expensive. But how am I going to store both of these cars in another array? Well, what I'll need to do is I'll need to make a new array called cars, and I have to put the B car in and the C car in. Now I have an array that contains other arrays, and within each of the other arrays is the information about the cars. Let's var dump this and have a look at what we see. Okay, so we have this huge thing that's been printed out for us. It's an array with 2 things, and each of those 2 things are the cars. In the first index, we have another array with 3 things that represents the type, the brand, and the price. And here is all the information about that first car. Then in the next index, we have another car with all of this information. Now, if we wanted to loop through this array, what we could do is we could use this for each loop. And instead, we're going to loop through the cars array. And I don't really care about the key, but I do care about the individual car arrays that are stored inside of there. And what I'll print is I'll print out the car's type. And maybe I'll also print out the car's brand. Cool. Let's see what happens. I might put an extra BR in between just to make sure it looks nice. And there you go, you can see our two cars are listed. So we have a sedan Toyota and a hatch Mazda. So the idea here is that this loop is iterating through the indexes 0 and 1. And then inside of that loop, we're accessing data directly from those inside car arrays and then printing it out onto one line. And this is it. This basically covers everything you'd really need to know about loops and arrays in PHP. In the next video, we're going to use everything that we've learned to start trying to generate users inside of our website.